We welcome you to another Sunday School lesson. Sunday School is a blessing and gift from God. Joseph, Jacob's favorite son, who was sold to slavery, made good in Egypt, and through God's leading, saved the entire civilized world from famine, and became a leader in the most powerful kingdom in the area of Middle East and North Africa. Jacob's family, already in Egypt, became fruitful and increased greatly, just as God promised. The new Pharaoh of Egypt, not knowing about Joseph, treated the Jews as slaves. Yet the more they are oppressed, the more the people multiply. Pharaoh feared the large population of Jews would rebel against them in war, so to stop the rapid population growth of the Jews, he commanded the Jewish midwives Shiphrah and Puah to throw every newborn Jewish son into the Nile. However, the midwives fear God and refuse to obey his command. Pharaoh repeats his command to all of his people, to cast every newborn Jewish male into the Nile River. The entire Jewish nation was in turmoil. This fearsome environment existed when Moses was born, facing death from the start of his life. At the time of our lesson, the Israelites had been in bondage in Egypt for about 350 years. The time was now ripe for a deliverer. Our lesson begins with chapter 2. Our first verse says, "Now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman." Moses' parents were both Levites, descendants of Levi, the son of Jacob. His parents are named in Exodus 6:20 as Amram, who married his father's sister or aunt named Jochebed. Moses was not their only child. In Exodus 2:4 the older sister of Moses is identified as Miriam, while Exodus 4:14 introduces his brother, Aaron. As a Levite, Moses would become a priest and the supreme mediator between God and Israel. Verse 2 says, "And she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. Jochebed conceived and gave birth to a son." The problem, however, is that Pharaoh had just announced all newborn sons must be thrown into the Nile River, where they were supposed to die. However, his mother saw he was a healthy, handsome child, so she preserves Moses' life. Hiding a newborn son for 3 months would have been extremely difficult, but by faith, Moses' parents feared God, not Pharaoh. Even more difficult, she would soon have to make a tough decision regarding her son's future, leaving his young life in God's hands. God would clearly reward her efforts with a miraculous turn of events. Verse 3 says, "But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile." When Moses was 3 months old, hiding him completely from the Egyptians was impossible. Rather than risk her entire family being caught and punished for hiding her newborn son, Jochebed makes a bold plan. She will, in a poetic sense, obey Pharaoh's command to cast into the Nile her Hebrew boy. At the same time, this move will give hope for her son's survival. She makes a basket from papyrus reeds, that grows along the Nile River, and coats it with the tar-like substances that cemented the reeds together, preventing the water from getting in, so it will float. The last part of the verse reveals the mother placing Moses in the basket, and placing the basket among the reeds by the river bank. Being a woman of faith, Jochebed undoubtedly trusted that God would care for her son. Verse 4 says, "His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him." Whether directed by her mother Jochebed, or at her own impulse, Moses' sister, Miriam wanted to know what was going to happen to her baby brother. Miriam plays an important part in the history of Israel and the Exodus. Even as a child, her courage would lead to saving the life of Moses and keeping their mother involved in his young life. Consequently, Miriam remained at a distance so that she might discover the outcome of her brother's situation, and bring the news to her mother. Verse 5 says, "Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the river bank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it." This verse introduces the daughter of Pharaoh. Her identity is uncertain, though there is possibility of her being Sobenefru, the daughter of Amenemhat III. Amenemhat had no surviving sons, and Sobenefru had no children, making her likely to adopt a child. Whoever this daughter was, her attitude is clearly much different than her father. He had commanded all infant sons to be thrown into the Nile River to die. She would find a newborn son and raise him as her own. This daughter of Pharaoh comes to the Nile to bathe, with her servant girls. Moses' mother possibly knew the routine and location, and hopes he would be cared for by this woman or one of the other women who bathed there. The verse says Pharaoh's daughter saw the basket and had a servant get it. The ark was placed in the right place, at the right time, and for the right person to find. God's timing and plans are always best. Verse 6 says, "She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him." "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. Pharaoh's daughter opens the basket and finds Moses crying. Unlike her father, who had ordered infanticide, this woman has a more compassionate heart. She takes pity on this seemingly abandoned, hungry child. This verse also makes it clear that she realized Moses was a Jewish male. This would have been clear for 3 reasons. First, the baby was found on the Nile River. Second, the child would have a Jewish complexion, a look distinct from the Egyptians. Third, and most importantly, Moses would have been circumcised. Pharaoh's daughter was used by God as his instrument to safeguard Moses. Verse 7 says, "Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, 'Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?' Miriam, Moses' sister who had been carefully watching what was happening to her baby brother, boldly approached Pharaoh's daughter and asked her, 'Shall I go and call a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you?' Miriam's question undoubtedly would have made sense to Pharaoh's daughter, who obviously would need a woman to provide milk for the baby, if she was going to keep him. Scripture does not reveal whether Jochebed instructed Miriam what to do or say, but God's protecting hand is clearly seen in what happened. God perfectly orchestrated events to uniquely prepare Moses for his future role. Verse 8 says, "Yes, go," she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter agrees to Miriam's suggestion. Miriam then brings her mother to Pharaoh's daughter. Miriam introduced the adoptive mother of Moses to his birth mother without the knowledge of the Pharaoh's daughter. Miriam's role is so important that Micah 6:4 later remembers her as someone God raised up to help free the Jewish people from bondage. Without her involvement, Moses' life would have been drastically different. Miriam approached the Pharaoh's daughter not knowing what would happen. Like Miriam, special opportunities may also come our way unexpectedly. When they do, we can't let the fear of what might happen to us cause us to miss an opportunity. We should be alert for the opportunities God gives us, especially in ministry and service, and take full advantage of them for His glory. Verse 9 says, "Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you.' So the woman took the baby and nursed him." Pharaoh has ordered the death of all Hebrew boys. In an interesting twist, the Pharaoh's own daughter discovers a Hebrew boy and feels compassion and defies her own father. She speaks to the mother of Moses, and arranges for him to be weaned and brought back to her. Instead of Moses dying in the Nile River, he is rescued, adopted, and placed into the care of his own birth mother. Notice that Jochebed's faith and courage was rewarded in at least 3 ways. First, she had her son back, for his life had been spared. Second, as Moses' own mother, she was allowed to nurse him and bring him up during the most formative years of his life. Third, the princess said to her, "And I will pay you." What a blessing! Moses' mother would be paid money for raising her own child. We serve a generous and gracious God, who often chooses to bless us more abundantly than we would dare to imagine. Even when circumstances make it look like God is absent, we can be sure that He is at work. Our final verse says, "When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water." While in the custody of his parents, Moses was being nursed on his own mother's milk. At the age of 3 or 4, Jochebed would have to give up her son once again. Surrendering her child to Pharaoh's daughter would take the same kind of faith she demonstrated when she put Moses in the basket. So, after being raised in his own father's home for those foundational years, Moses' mother Jochebed brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. Now, Moses moved to Pharaoh's palace to become the adopted son of a princess. Josephus wrote that Pharaoh's daughter had no children of her own, which indicates that Moses may have been in line to the throne of Egypt. After he was brought to Pharaoh's daughter as her son, she called his name Moses. She said that she gave him this name because I drew him out of the water. A reminder that he was drawn from the river. The name is especially appropriate for Moses because it was similar to the Hebrew word draw out. The birth of Moses. It was God's will to deliver his people from Egyptian oppression and to establish them in Canaan. To accomplish that purpose, God began to prepare a man to be his instrument of delivery. Moses was that man. This lesson informs us of Moses' birth and early childhood. It has illustrated God's great ability to use the most adverse circumstances and the most unlikely people to accomplish His will. We should be impressed with God's sovereignty and with His willingness to bless abundantly. The birth of Moses. 1. Faith in God can inspire us to do creative, energetic, and even dangerous things to solve problems and save lives. Exodus 2:1-3. God tells us to not worry, to pray, and He will give us peace because He is with us in the trenches. And even after the struggle, He will strengthen and calm us to serve others. 2. A mother's faith is often tested because she does not know what God plans to do. Exodus 2:3-4. Once a mother receives Christ by faith, she may be faced with challenges, but she cooperates, letting God lead throughout her way. 3. God delights in human compassion and innocent affection. Exodus 2:5-6. The Lord smiles when we acknowledge our weakness and our need of Him. 4. A timely suggestion can be a powerful influence on a person's decision. Exodus 2:7-8. Sound input allows a decision maker to visualize critical key points in making the decision. 5. They don't know it, but the resources of the wicked are at God's disposal. Exodus 2:9. God has the power to use evil resources to serve His purpose. We may call this part of God's will of disposition. 6. God often calls on parents to make some painful decisions concerning their children. Exodus 2:10. Parents have many difficult choices to make on behalf of their children, especially their safety, because they are better situated than most others to understand the unique needs of their child and their interests. We are truly glad you spent time to learn this lesson with us. We hope you are blessed and may share these with somebody else. Thank you very much, have a great week, and God bless you always, dear brothers and sisters.